to start this deep dive with a number that, frankly, just shouldn't exist. $21 billion.
A staggering figure.
It really is. That is the rough valuation of TKO Group holdings right now. And for anyone who maybe hasn't been tracking the M&A activity on Wall Street lately, TKO is this sort of Frankenstein monster created by merging the UFC and the WWE into a single publicly traded entity.
Right, which effectively monopolizes the entire market for combat sports and sports entertainment under one single corporate roof.
But that's the paradox I just can't get past as we dive into this. You have the UFC on one side, which is legitimate unscripted violence, bones breaking blood on the canvas, actual outcomes that Vegas sets real lines on.
It's a real deal.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have WWE, scripted drama, predetermined winners, spandex, and spray tan. And yet Wall Street looked at these two things, the real and the fake, and decided they had the exact same asset class.
Well, because to the shareholder they are. I mean, they were both just massive content engines. But to the cultural critic, or even just the average fan, that valuation validates something really specific and kind of profound.
Which is what?
It validates the idea that the quote-unquote fake is just as valuable, if not actually more so than the real.
Which brings us to the lazy critique. I mean, you tell someone you're analyzing wrestling, and the very first thing out of their mouth is always, it's fake, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a conversational equivalent of a wet blanket.
It really is.
It's also just intellectually lazy. It misses the entire point.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't walk out of a production of Hamlet and say to the person next to us, he didn't really die right, the sword was blunt. We understand it as theater.
Right, we willingly suspend our disbelief. But wrestling occupies this really weird liminal space. It's not quite a sport. It's not quite traditional theater. It's not quite a con game. But it's also somehow all of those things at the exact same time.
A hybrid.
Exactly. So the mission for our deep dive today is to stop treating wrestling like a fake sport and start treating it as a very real, very complex system of science. We are looking at this entire spectacle through the lens of theater theory, history, and semiotics.
We're going to decode the spectacle for you. We have some heavy hitters in the source stack today. We've got Roland Barthes' philosophical essays on semiotics, which is a fascinating lens for this. We have academic papers comparing modern wrestling to commedia dell'arte and ancient Greek drama.
We've got historical accounts of the carnival circuit.
Yes, and of course the modern financial filings from the TKO empire.
So we are essentially going to bridge the gap between French philosophy and carny grifters, because I really think you can't understand that $20 billion Wall Street valuation without understanding the sawdust on the floor of a tent in the 1920s.
The lineage is incredibly direct. The methods have certainly changed and the production value has gone through the roof, but the psychological hook, that core thing that keeps you watching, that hasn't changed in a century.
Let's start with the foundation then, the vocabulary. If you follow the industry even a little bit, you know the word kayfabe.
K-A-Y-F-A-B.
Right. It's thrown around constantly on the internet now.
Yeah.
You hear about breaking kayfabe or protecting kayfabe. But our sources show that the modern usage has really diluted what the word actually meant to the people who lived it.
Completely diluted. Today, fans basically use it to mean staying in character, like an actor on a press tour. But originally, it was a rigid code of silence. It was omerta.
The mafia code.
Essentially, yes. The etymology is debated by historians, but most agree it's old carny slang. It's pig Latin, basically.
So be fake becomes kayfabe.
Right. Or some historians in our stack argue it comes from be cave as in caveat, or be careful.
Be careful makes a lot more sense to me given the historical context, because as the sources point out, this didn't start as family entertainment. It started as a literal grift.
Exactly. You have to go back to the late 19th and early 20th century. Traveling carnivals. You have what they called the AT show, the athletic show.
Picture the classic carnival barker.
Right. A wrestler stands in the ring out back, and the barker challenges the local tough guys. Bet you $1 you can't last 5 minutes with our guy.
And the local tough guy from the town is the mark.
The mark, the target of the con. Now, usually the carnival wrestler is skilled enough to handle the local blacksmith or the farmhand without much trouble. But what happens if the local guy is actually a shooter?
A shooter meaning a legitimate fighter.
Right. What if he's legitimately dangerous? The carnival can't afford to lose that prize money.
It's just bad for business.
Terrible for business. So you have the hooker, and this is a term that has obviously changed meaning over the decades. But in the carnival days, a hooker was a master of submission holds. He was the enforcer for the carnival.
So if the mark was actually getting too close to winning, the hooker would step in.
Exactly. He would apply a legitimate hooker hold that could actually break a limb and just end the fight right there, legitimately injuring the guy to protect the carnival's money.
So the very DNA of the professional wrestling industry is built on deception for the sake of profit protection. It wasn't about putting on a dazzling show initially. It was about working the crowd and keeping the cash.
And that paranoia, that absolute need to protect the business model, is exactly why kayfabe became so strict as wrestling moved out of the carnival tents and into actual sporting arenas.
It became less about the show and more about the lifestyle.
It was a lifestyle you could not break. We have accounts in the sources from the territory days where babyface the good guys and heels the bad guys were strictly forbidden from traveling together.
They would get fired for it on the spot.
Absolutely. Think about it. If you were the hated villain who just cheated to beat up the town hero, and then a fan sees you buying a beer for that same hero at a roadside diner an hour later,
You're killing the town.
You're exposing the con. The promoters would blackball you from the industry. You were messing with their livelihood.
There is that seminal moment detailed in the history sources from 1987 that really illustrates this massive collision between the old Carney Code and modern reality. The arrest of the Iron Sheik and Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Oh man, this is the moment the curtain really caught fire.
Context is so key here for you listening. It's 1987. The Cold War is still very real in the minds of Americans.
Very real.
And the Iron Sheik isn't just a generic bad guy. He is the ultimate avatar of America's enemies. He's Iranian, he's waving the flag, he's literally spitting on the USA on television.
And on the flip side, you have Hacksaw Jim Duggan, the goofy, lovable, ultimate patriot carrying a literal 2x4 piece of wood to the ring.
They are mortal enemies. They are booked to fight each other in a violent blood feud across the entire country. The entire ticket sales model for those arenas relies on people paying hard-earned money to see Duggan beat up the Sheik.
And then New Jersey State Troopers pull over a car on the highway.
A car driven by Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
With the Iron Sheik sitting right there in the passenger seat.
And they're high on cocaine.
They have open alcohol containers in the car.
Yeah.
It is a massive bust.
It's a PR disaster on so many levels. Obviously, the DUI and the drugs are bad for any corporate sponsor. But for the wrestling business, the actual scandal was, why are they in a car together?
It broke the hearts of the marks. I remember reading the newspaper reports from that time in our source material. Fans were genuinely confused. It wasn't just a reaction of, oh, they're actors. It was a profound betrayal.
It shattered the illusion that these men actually hated each other.
Completely shattered it. Vince McMahon, who was running the WWF at the time, was apoplectic. He fired Duggan instantly, though he did quietly bring him back later on. But the damage to the illusion was done.
It seems like that was the major crack in the dam, but the dam didn't fully burst until Vince McMahon himself took a sledgehammer to it. And the kicker is, he didn't do it for artistic integrity or transparency.
No, he did it to save a buck.
He did it to dodge taxes. Let's talk about the 1989 New Jersey Senate testimony.
This is such a pivotal moment in the sources. This is where professional wrestling legally ceases to be a sport in the eyes of the government.
Walk us through the mechanics of this.
So up until the late 80s, wrestling was regulated by state athletic commissions exactly like boxing or amateur wrestling.
Which means red tape.
Lots of red tape. It meant you had to pay a percentage tax on the live gate revenue. You had to have state-mandated doctors and ambulances on site. You had to pay for athletic licenses for every performer.
It was incredibly expensive for a touring company.
Right. And Vince McMahon is looking at his massive expansion balance sheet thinking, why on earth am I paying these sporting taxes? We aren't actually competing.
So he goes before the state senate and explicitly testifies under oath that his product is sports entertainment.
He coins the phrase right there. He legally admits the outcomes are predetermined. He admits the maneuvers are choreographed and cooperative.
He argues that because it is not a legitimate contest of skill or chance, it shouldn't be taxed like one.
Exactly. He officially killed kayfabe on the legal record to avoid the athletic commission tax.
And it worked. They deregulated it.
It worked perfectly.
Yeah.
But this leads us to the neo-kayfabe era that we are in right now. Everyone knows it's scripted. The promoter literally told the government it's scripted. The internet reports on the scripts.
And yet we still watch. Millions of people still pack stadiums.
That is the pivotal question of this whole deep dive. If the con is completely exposed, why does the audience stay?
And I think this is where we have to pivot to the highbrow stuff in our stack. We have to bring in the French philosopher Roland Barthes.
Oh, his essay, The World of Wrestling. It is easily one of those brilliant pieces in his entire collection, Mythologies.
Berthes makes this incredible argument that the fact that it's fake is actually the entire point of the exercise.
Right. He says that in a real sport like boxing or judo, the action is often opaque to the viewer.
It's messy.
Exactly. You can watch a legitimate boxing match for 10 rounds and just see two guys hugging, circling, throwing light jabs. It can be incredibly boring. It doesn't always tell a cohesive story.
It's morally ambiguous.
Wrestling actively eliminates that ambiguity. Barthes calls it a spectacle of excess. He argues that wrestling isn't about finding out who the better athlete is. It's about displaying a moral concept in its most absolute exaggerated form.
He uses the semiotic terms signifier and signified. Let's break that down for you listening using a modern example, because Barthes' example of a wrestler named Thauvin is a bit dated for us today.
Let's look at a current massive superstar. Let's look at Gunther in WWE, the ring general.
Okay, Gunther. He's Austrian, he's massive, stoic, he chops people's chests until they literally blister and bleed.
Perfect example. So the signifier, the physical sign, is his body and his physical demeanor. He stands perfectly tall, hands clasped behind his back, scowling at the crowd. He's physically imposing, rigid, completely unsmiling.
So that's the signifier. What is the signified?
The signified, the abstract concept he is meant to represent to the audience, is order, or pure authoritarianism.
He is the physical, literal embodiment of a regime.
Exactly. When you see Gunther, you don't need to look up his win-loss record on Wikipedia. You look at him and you instantly understand this man imposes his will on others.
And when a babyface hero finally knocks him down after getting beaten up for 20 minutes, the audience isn't cheering because a guy in black trunks fell over.
No, they are cheering because order has been disrupted. They are cheering because freedom has literally punched tyranny in the mouth.
Barthes has this great specific line about the 5 minutes of truth. He says wrestling condenses all of life into these perfectly intelligible moments.
Yes. He compares a wrestler suffering in a submission hold to a character carved into classical architecture or a painting.
Like a theatrical mask?
Exactly like a mask. When a wrestler is locked in a hold, grimacing, pounding the mat, reaching out desperately for the ropes, it is the absolute distilled visual essence of suffering.
It's suffering with a capital S.
It has to be instantly readable from the very back row of a massive stadium. That's why the acting in wrestling is so incredibly loud and big.
That's why they literally stomp the mat with their boot when they throw a fake punch.
Right. It's not because they are bad actors who don't know how to punch. It's because they are actively communicating a sign to 80,000 people. I am hitting him. He is hurting.
If they acted like subtle method actors in an indie film, the crowd would be bored to tears. They wouldn't be able to read the signs.
So the whole fake critique fails right out of the gate because it judges wrestling by the strict standards of a sport where the only goal is a statistical result.
But wrestling is theater. And in theater, the goal is a feeling. And when you frame it that way, looking at our academic sources, the comparisons to classical theater aren't just academic fluff, they are structural realities of the business.
The strongest parallel in the research is to commedia dell'arte, 16th century Italian comedy.
I was actually so surprised by how one-to-one this comparison really is when going through the stack. You have the exact same stock characters.
It's the identical roster. In commedia, you have Arlecchino the Harlequin.
Right.
He's acrobatic. He's childlike. He has boundless energy. In WWE, that's Rey Mysterio. That's your classic high-flyer underdog.
And then you have Il Capitano.
The captain, the swaggering, boastful soldier who claims to be a war hero but is actually a massive coward.
That is the archetype for almost every heel in wrestling history.
Think of The Miz or early Chris Jericho. They talk a huge game on the microphone, but the exact moment the bell rings and the fight starts, they are begging off, backing into the corner, hiding behind the referee.
Yelling, "Not the face, don't hit the face."
It's literally a 500-year-old bit. And the underlying structure of the performance is exactly the same too. Commedia wasn't fully scripted out with dialogue. They used a scenario.
A scenario being just a rough outline of the plot points.
Right, like character A meets character B, they have a misunderstanding, they fight, character B wins.
In wrestling vocabulary, that's the booking.
The booking, exactly. And the Italian actors fill in the middle of that outline with lazzi, which were improvised comic routines or specific physical gags they had mastered. In wrestling, we call those spots.
High spots, hope spots.
Right. If a villainous wrestler pulls down his opponent's tights to embarrass him in front of the crowd, that is a lazzi. It's a physical gag designed to pop the crowd in the moment.
So the wrestlers are out there improvising their way through a predetermined structure, just like the Italian acting troupes did in the piazzas.
But there's one major, massive difference between a traditional play and a professional wrestling match.
The audience.
The audience. In a play, the audience is passive. You sit in the dark and you watch. In wrestling, the audience is an active, crucial part of the cast.
The Greek chorus.
The academic papers make this connection so clearly.
This is honestly my favorite theoretical connection in the whole deep dive, because if you think about Greek tragedy, the chorus stands off to the side of the stage and essentially tells the audience how to feel about the action.
Oedipus has sinned. The gods are angry.
Right. But in wrestling, the live crowd itself is the chorus. Their real-time chants actively direct the flow of the action.
If the crowd starts chanting, "This is awesome," the wrestlers in the ring know instantly to keep doing exactly what they're doing. They ride that wave.
And if they chant, "boring,"
then the wrestlers have to change gears immediately. They might throw a punch or go for a high-risk move. They are editing the script in real time based on the chorus's judgment.
But the modern era of wrestling has introduced this weird glitch into the classical system. What happens when the chorus flat out refuses to follow the script they are being fed?
The hijack.
We saw this vividly with Roman Reigns a few years ago.
The perfect modern example of the chorus revolting. The corporate script dictated that Roman Reigns was the new hero. He was the next Hulk Hogan. He was the ultimate babyface.
But the chorus, the fans, they rejected the sign completely.
They didn't buy what the corporate machine was selling. They felt he was forced, so they booed him out of the building night after night for years. The company kept trying stubbornly to present him as the good guy saving the day, and the audience kept aggressively chanting, "You suck."
It created this bizarre dissonance where the play kind of fell apart because the chorus refused to agree with the protagonist's morality.
Contrast that exact situation with Daniel Bryan.
The yes movement.
Right. Here you had a performer the corporate machine historically didn't want as the top guy. He was too small, he was too scruffy, he began to look like an action figure.
They wanted him to be a mid-card supporting character.
But the chorus fell madly in love with him. They connected with his underdog status. They chanted yes so loud and for so long during every single show that they literally forced the publicly traded company to rewrite the main event of WrestleMania.
It's wild. It's like if the audience at a performance of Hamlet just started chanting for Rosencrantz to kill the king and the actors just had to shrug and go with it.
That is the incredibly unique power of professional wrestling. The fourth wall isn't just broken, it's a sliding glass door. The audience can walk right through it and fundamentally change the ending of the story.
Now, we have talked a lot about the Western traditions here, Greek drama, Italian comedy, but the visual language of wrestling owes a massive, massive debt to the East as well, specifically Japanese kabuki theater.
The aesthetic of excess translates perfectly across cultures.
The mist. The Asian mist is the prime example in the sources.
The great kabuki, Akihisa Mera. He was a legendary wrestler who brought that specific gimmick to American audiences in the 80s.
Explain the gimmick for anyone who hasn't seen it.
It's the theatrical act of a wrestler suddenly spitting this cloud of green or red mist directly into their opponent's eyes. It visually reads as blinding them. It stains their skin and clothes.
It's a purely theatrical, magical device. It's not a real martial arts attack.
No, it comes directly from the highly stylized movements, the kata of traditional kabuki theater.
And you still see it today.
Oh, absolutely. You see it with Asuka in WWE right now. She comes down to the ring wearing elaborate traditional masks, intricate robes, and she uses the green mist to win matches.
It connects a modern squared circle in America directly back to the stages of 17th century Japan. It proves that wrestling is just this massive cultural sponge. It absorbs everything.
Philosophy, comedy, tragedy, mythology, it mashes it all together into this live-action, violent ballet.
Let's transition and talk about the actual physical mechanics of that violent ballet, because we've used the word fake a lot in this deep dive, but we really need to address the very real physical reality of the performers. This is what the industry calls the working part of the business.
This is where the rubber meets the road, or I guess more accurately, where the spine meets the plywood.
Al Snow, who is a famous veteran wrestler and trainer, has this quote in the sources that always sticks with me. He says, "There is simply no way to fake falling down."
You can't fake gravity. He compares taking a standard bump, which is just jumping up and landing flat on your back on the canvas, to being in a 25-mile-per-hour car accident.
A minor car accident, sure. But imagine being in a 25-mile-per-hour car accident 15 times a night
4 nights a week.
For 20 years straight.
The cumulative physical trauma on the human body is just undeniable. We aren't talking about fake pain here. We are talking about severely managed pain.
Which leads to massive issues with addiction and CTE, which the sources touch on. But look at someone like Kurt Angle. He won an actual Olympic gold medal in legitimate freestyle wrestling.
With a broken freaking neck, as he likes to remind everyone.
Which is an insane athletic achievement in its own right.
It is. But he went on record in our source stack saying that professional wrestling was physically harder on his body than training for the Olympics.
Harder than the Olympics?
Because in the Olympics, you compete in a tournament and then your body rests. In WWE, you are on the road 300 days a year.
You are driving 200 miles in a rental car to the next town, sleeping 4 hours in a cheap hotel, and then throwing your body at the ground all over again.
That relentless grind creates a very specific kind of camaraderie among the talent, but it also creates a very specific kind of danger. It requires an immense level of absolute trust between performers.
The work rate.
Right, the work rate. In a real legitimate bar fight, I am actively trying to hurt you. In a professional wrestling match, I am trying to protect you while simultaneously making it look to the cheap seats like I am trying to kill you.
If I am going to give you a pile driver, literally turning you upside down and dropping you directly onto your head, I have to protect your neck with my thighs.
And if I slip on a spot of sweat, if my timing is an inch off, you are instantly paralyzed.
So the villainous heel who is trying to violently murder the babyface on television is actually the very person intimately responsible for the babyface's literal life and safety in reality.
It is a profound partnership. It is intimate physical cooperation disguised as hatred. And that dissonance is just fascinating when you really analyze it.
Now I want to pivot a bit to the darker side of the mirror we've been talking about. We established that wrestling reflects society's values through these signs. But sometimes the mirror is cracked. Or it shows us something we really don't want to see about ourselves.
Wrestling has a very long, very ugly history of exploiting racial and national stereotypes. Othering is the academic term used in the papers we reviewed.
It's the classic foreign menace trope.
It's the easiest, cheapest way to get heat, to get the crowd to actively boo. You just send a guy out there who isn't American, give him a foreign flag, and have him say, "Your American town stinks."
It works every single time.
Every time. From Fritz von Erich playing an unrepentant Nazi villain in the post-war 50s, to the Iron Sheik during the Iranian hostage crisis in the 80s, to Rusev representing Putin's Russia in the 2000s.
But there is one specific case study in the academic sources that really chilled me when I was preparing for this deep dive. The story of Muhammad Hassan in 2005.
Oh, this is the ultimate cautionary tale of the mirror, reflecting too much reality. So to set the scene, it's post-9/11. Tensions and prejudices in America are still incredibly high. WWE creates a character named Muhammad Hassan.
He is an Arab American character.
Right. And originally the way he was written was incredibly nuanced and compelling. His initial promos were him standing in the ring saying, "I was born in America, I pay my taxes here, but ever since 9/11, you all treat me like a terrorist at the airport." And that is fundamentally unfair.
That is a legitimate, deeply real social grievance. He was telling the absolute truth about the Arab American experience at the time.
He was. And in a more evolved narrative medium, he would have clearly been the babyface. The crowd should have listened and realized, hey, he's right, we are being prejudiced.
But that's not what happened in the arenas.
Not even close. The chorus completely rejected the nuance. They booed him mercilessly. They chanted USA over his speaking. They wanted him to just be the cartoonish terrorist that they actively feared in real life.
And the company, instead of sticking to the nuanced story, the company indulged the crowd's prejudice.
They leaned all the way in. They stopped writing him as a sympathetic victim of profiling and just started writing him as a generic, violent, extremist villain.
And it culminated in a deeply unfortunate segment.
They filmed a segment where he summoned these men in ski masks to violently attack The Undertaker. And the network aired that pre-taped segment on the exact same day as the tragic London bombings in 2005.
The timing was just horrific.
It was a disaster. The mainstream media outrage was instant and massive. The television network UPN demanded the character be removed from the broadcast immediately.
WWE literally killed the character off on screen and never mentioned him again.
It shows the distinct danger of the mirror. Wrestling constantly tries to ride the wave of real-world headlines to get a reaction, but it fundamentally lacks the nuance to handle real severe trauma.
It reduces complex, terrifying geopolitics to broad cartoons, and sometimes that cartoon just gets way too close to the bone.
It creates a toxic feedback loop. The crowd's real-world prejudice informs the creative booking. The booking validates and reinforces the crowd's prejudice, and the cycle just spins out of control.
That cynical, edgy tone was really the absolute hallmark of the Attitude Era in the late 90s, though. We talk about it so fondly now with massive stars like Stone Cold and The Rock, but as the sources describe it, it was essentially crash TV.
Oh, it was Jerry Springer with a body slam. It perfectly reflected the cultural nihilism of the late 90s, the end of history era.
People simply didn't want the wholesome, eat your vitamins, say your prayers morality of an 80s Hulk Hogan anymore.
They wanted Stone Cold Steve Austin drinking a ridiculous amount of beer and physically assaulting his billionaire boss.
Stone Cold is the ultimate tweener in wrestling terminology. He wasn't a traditional good guy, he was a bad guy we all decided we liked.
He was the ultimate anti-hero. He represented the pent-up frustration of the American working class. Everyone hates their corporate boss.
So Stone Cold did what we all fantasized about doing on a Monday morning.
Exactly. So even though he constantly broke the rules and cheated, which are historically strictly heel traits, he became the biggest merchandise-selling babyface in the history of the industry.
But fast forward to today for you listening. The Attitude Era is long, long gone. We are fully in the corporate era now, the TKO era.
The boardroom suit and tie era.
We started this deep dive talking about the $20 billion valuation, but let's look at what that Wall Street money actually buys today, because it buys a corporate talent pipeline that is fundamentally changing the DNA of the industry.
You're talking about the WWE ID program.
Right. In the old days, wrestlers came from the circus, or they were failed football players, or they just drove from tiny town to tiny town learning the craft and freezing barns.
And it's an old school apprenticeship. You learned by doing. You learned by starving, basically.
Now,
WWE is actively recruiting elite NCAA college athletes, Olympic hopefuls, gymnasts, track stars.
they are signing them to NIL deals, name, image, and likeness while they are still living in their college dorms. They are building an athletic factory.
They're essentially trying to create superstars in a corporate lab. They bring them to a state-of-the-art performance center and teach them the specific WWE style from day one.
How to walk to the ring, how to talk to the hard camera, how to fall safely. But does that risk sanitizing the product entirely? If every single performer learns the exact same holds at the exact same corporate school, doesn't everyone just start to look and wrestle exactly the same?
That is the big underlying fear outlined in the industry analysis. The chaotic territory system of the 70s and 80s produced wildly unique characters, specifically because they all came from vastly different regional backgrounds and training camps.
If everyone comes through the exact same polished pipeline, you risk total homogenization. You risk losing that gritty, carny soul that built the empire.
And speaking of the corporate business model, we really have to address the massive labor issue highlighted in the financial reports. This is the elephant in the room that has been sitting there for 40 years. The independent contractor classification.
It is easily the most controversial legal aspect of the entire business. WWE legally classifies its in-ring talent as independent contractors.
Just like an Uber driver or a freelance graphic designer.
Exactly. Which means the wrestlers generally pay their own travel expenses, they handle their own independent taxes, and historically, they pay for their own private health insurance.
But, and this is the massive legal contradiction, they are entirely exclusive to WWE.
Meaning, if you work for WWE, you absolutely cannot go work a show for their competitor AEW on your day off. You can't just take a weekend booking in Japan to make extra cash.
Which completely flies in the face of what an independent contractor legally is. If I hire an independent plumber to fix my sink, I can't legally tell him he's banned from fixing my neighbor's sink tomorrow.
Precisely. Legal scholars in our sources have argued for decades that these performers are blatantly misclassified employees.
But because there is absolutely no talent union in wrestling, and because WWE has historically held a total monopoly on the top tier of industry wages, the system just persists unchallenged.
And the recent merger with UFC, which notoriously also uses the exact same independent contractor model for its fighters, only solidifies that labor structure. It's a massive labor monopsony.
It truly is. And the sources argue it creates a very distinct culture of psychological control backstage. We have direct quotes from former writers and wrestlers, guys like EC3 or Vince Russo, who outright describe the corporate culture as brainwashing.
The ingrained idea that you were conditioned from day one to be deeply grateful just to have a job in the big leagues, so you better not rock the boat.
You don't ask for health benefits, you don't pitch your own creative ideas, you just do what the script says and take the bump.
Yet even in this highly controlled, sanitized corporate environment, the moments that truly resonate with the fans are the ones that feel like the talent is violently breaking the machine. We have to talk about the pipe bomb.
2011, CM Punk.
For the uninitiated listener, set the scene for this moment.
So CM Punk was a massively popular but legitimately disgruntled wrestler. His contract with the company was legitimately expiring in real life.
He was actually leaving.
He was walking away. But WWE gave him a live microphone on their flagship television show, Raw. And he went out there, walked to the top of the entrance stage, sat down, cross-legged, crisscross applesauce, and he just completely unloaded on the company.
He broke every single unwritten rule of modern wrestling television.
He explicitly mentioned other rival wrestling companies by name, which was forbidden. He personally insulted Vince McMahon's family. He directly insulted the Wall Street shareholders.
He called out the sycophantic yes men backstage.
And the live audience went absolutely feral.
Because they couldn't tell what was real and what was part of the show. Is he actually supposed to say this? Are they about to cut his microphone feed?
It blurred the lines so flawlessly. In industry terms, it was a work shoot. It actively weaponized backstage reality to deeply enhance the on-screen fiction.
That is the absolute sweet spot for a wrestling fan. That is the drug, when you legitimately can't see the strings pulling the puppet.
But sometimes the backstage reality leaks out in ways the corporation absolutely cannot control. Which brings us to Dolphins 1925.
The internet betting scandal. I have to admit, this totally blew my mind when I read the sources. I didn't even realize you could legally bet real money on professional wrestling.
You can bet on almost anything online. But yes, offshore sportsbooks regularly take action on scripted match outcomes.
Which seems incredibly ripe for fraud, given that the outcome is literally written on a script sitting on a writer's desk.
Enter Dolphins 1925, an anonymous Reddit user. A few years ago, he started posting the predetermined winners of every single WWE pay-per-view match right before the broadcast started.
What was his accuracy rate?
100%. He went something like 38 for 38 over several months, which is statistically impossible to guess.
So he clearly had a direct leak from the creative team.
He was explicitly proving a point. He publicly claimed he was doing it to expose that WWE insiders were secretly betting on their own scripted product to make money. It showed that despite the shiny billion-dollar corporate valuation, despite the prestigious New York Stock Exchange listing, the old carny element is still very much alive in the shadows. Someone in the back is whispering the predetermined finish to their buddy to make a quick grand on an offshore betting site.
It's almost comforting in a weird, twisted way that under the highly polished, sterile veneer of TKO Group Holdings, it's all still just a carnival grift.
The grift is the feature. It's not a bug.
So bringing this all home, we've covered French semiotics, ancient Greek tragedy, labor monopsonies, and offshore betting scandals.
Who really ran the gamut?
Why does this art form endure? Why, after all the sawdust carnival tents have literally rotted away, are we still gathering in massive football stadiums to watch a fake fight?
I think to answer that, we have to look at the sociologist Emil Durkheim. He coined this brilliant term, collective effervescence.
That specific electric feeling you get when you're packed in a crowd.
Exactly. Humans are fundamentally social animals. We deeply crave ritual, we crave easily understood stories, and frankly, we crave a safe communal space to express aggression.
Wrestling provides a highly structured venue where we can scream at the top of our lungs, we can loudly boo the villain, and we can physically see justice delivered in real time.
It is an incredible catharsis.
It's a modern living mythology. It's Hercules battling the Hydra, but with heavy metal music and pyrotechnics.
It is a violent ballet of morality. It artificially simplifies an incredibly complex, terrifying real world into clear, good versus evil, and it lets us watch evil literally get powerbombed through a wooden table. That visceral satisfaction, that is easily worth $20 billion to a broadcaster.
Well, here is my final provocative thought for you to chew on after this deep dive. We are entering this massive new corporate era, the Netflix streaming era, the TKO era. The product is getting noticeably cleaner, slicker, much more heavily produced.
High definition perfection.
But as the outcomes of these modern myths are increasingly decided by corporate algorithms and boardroom shareholders, rather than the raw, visceral gut reaction of a promoter listening to the live crowd, does the sign lose its ancient power?
That is the existential danger for the medium.
If the live crowd, the Greek chorus, stops being the real-time director of the action and just becomes another passive prop on a corporate television set, does the magic completely die? Can wrestling survive if it stops being a messy live dialogue and starts being just a sterile corporate lecture?
If it loses that fundamental sense of danger, if it loses the feeling that literally anything could happen and the script could be torn up at any second, then it just becomes a standard TV show about wrestling.
Yeah.
And that is a very fundamentally different thing than wrestling itself.
Well, the next time you happen to see a clip online of a guy getting hit over the head with a steel chair, don't just scroll past it. Look a little closer for the signs.
Looking for the Arlecchino flying off the ropes. Look for the boastful captain begging for mercy.
And most importantly, respect the bump.
Always respect the physical bump.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the ring.